Hello, Class 6B. This is your English lesson for the week of the 18th of January to the 22nd of January. And the plan for this week is we'll do the poem, Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening. And then we'll practice the irregular verbs in group 4. And then we'll do exercises 68, 70, and 72 about chapter 8 in your Ghost at the Castle book. And if you want, before you do the exercises, it might be a good idea to read the chapter again or listen to me read it again so it's fresh in your mind. Okay, so I wish you good work. You can also divide up this work a bit if you want, so you don't spend too long at once doing it. Hello, dear students, and welcome to English. We're going to start with a poem today, and the poem is about a man who is traveling by horse through a snowy landscape, and he wants to stop for a little while and just enjoy the snow and how it looks. And the name of the poem is Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening by Robert Frost. So I will say one line and then you'll repeat after me. I have some children here who will also repeat, so just speak when the children speak. Whose woods these are, I think I know.
Whose woods these are, I think I know.
His house is in the village, though.
His house is in the village, though.
He will not see me stopping here.
He will not see me stopping here.
To watch his woods fill up with snow.
To watch his woods fill up with snow.
My little horse must think it queer.
My little horse must think it queer.
To stop without a farmhouse near.
To stop without a farmhouse near.
Between the woods and frozen lake.
Between the woods and frozen lake.
The darkest evening of the year.
The darkest evening of the year.
He gives his harness bells a shake.
He gives his harness bells a shake.
To ask if there is some mistake.
To ask if there is some mistake.
The only other sounds the sweep.
The only other sound the sweep.
Of easy wind and downy flake.
Of easy wind and downy flake.
The woods are lovely, dark and deep.
The woods are lovely, dark and deep.
But I have promises to keep.
But I have promises to keep.
And miles to go before I sleep.
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 Okay, today we have some new irregular verbs to practice. They're on page 77 of your book, and it is group 4 that starts with learn. And these are a little bit special verbs because the verbs can end with either ed or t. So we'll say them through twice, the first time with t and the second time with ed. And I will say them and then you repeat after me, and I have some helpers who will do the repeating part, so you speak at the same time as the helpers. So let's start. Verbrennen. To burn, burnt, burnt.
Verbrennen.
to burnt, burnt, burnt.
Lernen, to learn, learnt, learnt.
Lernen, to learn, learned, learned.
Riechen, to smell, smelt, smelt.
Riechen, to smell, smelt, smelt.
Buchstabieren, to spell, spelt, spelt.
Buchstabieren, to spell, spelt, spelt.
Verderben, to spoil, spoilt, spoilt.
Verderben, to spoil, spoilt, spoilt.
Verschütten, to spill, spilt, spilt.
Verschütten, to spill, spilt, spilt.
Okay, now we'll do it one more time, this time with the ed ending. Verbrennen, to burn, burned, burned.
Verbrennen, to burn, burned, burned.
Lernen, to learn, learned, learned.
Lernen, to learn, learned, learned.
Riechen, to smell, smelled, smelled.
Riechen, to smell, smelled, smelled.
Buchstabieren, to spell, spelled, spelled.
Buchstabieren, to spell, spelled, spelled.
Verderben, to spoil, spoiled, spoiled.
Verderben.
To spoil, spoiled, spoiled.
Verschütten, to spill, spilled, spilled.
Verschütten, to spill, spilled, spilled.
Okay, super. So our next task is to do exercises 68, 70, and 72. And they're on page 70 and 71 of your book. And I have my book open now to page 70. And you should put your answers in your English notebook. And if you are not sure what to put as a title, you could just put Ghost at the Castle. Or sorry, Ghosts at the Castle, chapter 8, exercises. That is a good title. And what I'll do is I will actually do the exercises now with you. If you want, you can pause the video at any time and try them a bit alone and then watch and check if your answers are correct, or you can just do them with me right now. You decide what works for you, okay? But you might want to, I think you'll need to pause whenever you have to write. So we'll start here with the who, what, where, and they help you a lot. It says look on page 25 and 26 to find the answers, okay? And questions 1 and 2 are, where was someone still working in the middle of the night? And then, who was it? So then we go to page 25. And we're thinking here, where was someone working? And then it's always good to look in the chapter to find exactly where it says. And it says, it was now the middle of the night, but in the kitchen, someone was still working. It was Mrs. Sourdough, the cook. So there we have our answers. I'll flip back to page 70 for for the question. I'll put this thing in the page to keep it. Okay, so then I will write exercise 68 and question 1. And it's always good to write in full sentences because it's just good practice for English. So the question is, where was someone still working? And you can say someone was still working. And do you remember where? That's right. In the kitchen. And then who was it? It was Mrs. Sourdough. And that's a funny name for a cook because sour is like soira and dough is teig, right? So it was Mrs. Sourdough. Okay, so that was 1 and 2. Now we have to answer question 3. What had she not heard because she was so busy? And we go back to page 25. What had she not heard? Maybe you know. Do you remember what she didn't hear? And it says, she was so busy that she had not heard all the shouting. So what hadn't she heard? She had not heard the shouting. So we write that down. And remember, we look at the verb in the question to help us know what verb we put in the answer. She had not heard the shouting. The people were afraid of the ghosts, right? So they were shouting. But Mrs. Sourdough was busy. She didn't hear it. Okay. On to the next question. Who ran into the kitchen? So let's see. Bang! The door of the kitchen opened and a short, fat man ran in. So, who ran in? It was a short, fat man. So, we can say a short, fat man ran in the kitchen. Okay, and our next question is, what did Mrs. Sourdough do with the short man? So let's see. Mrs. Sourdough jumped up. A robber in her kitchen. She took the short man in her big hands and lifted him up into the air. What did she do to him? She lifted him up into the air. She must be very strong. from stirring all of that dough. She must be a very strong lady. Okay. And then let's see the next question. 6. What did Mr. Cleverbrain think the person in white must be? Think a minute. What things are often white? And this must be on page 26. So, if we look here at line 3 and 4, Mr. Cleverbrain was so frightened he couldn't speak. A big person in white was holding him. It must be a ghost. A ghost. So, we know that Mr. Cleverbrain thought it was a ghost. So we can say he, for Mr. Cleverbrain, he thought it was a ghost. Okay. And then number 7, where did the cook throw Mr. Cleverbrain? So back to page 26. And let's see. It says on line 8, and she threw Mr. Cleverbrain into the hall of the castle and closed the door. So, where did she throw Mr. Cleverbrain? She threw, the past of throw is threw. She threw Mr. Cleverbrain into the hall. So just out of the kitchen into the hall. Okay. The last question is, who gave a 10-pound note to each guard? Well, let's look and see. Here, gentlemen, said Mr. Smarthead, and put a 10-pound note into each guard's hand. Thank you for letting us pass. So it was Mr. Smarthead who gave the guards money. The guards are getting gifts so that they let people leave the castle. They're running away from the ghosts, right? So it was Mr. Smarthead gave the guards and it's hard to write the pound sign. I am not a pro at that, but I will do my best. I think it's something like that. 10-pound notes. Okay, and so that was exercise 68. I hope you were able to follow along okay. All right. And the next exercise we said was exercise 70. Listen, if you're tired and want a break, you can just stop the video and then start it again another time. Okay? Exercise 70, though, we'll get started with now. It's a little bit different. It's about changing verbs into the past tense. We've been talking a lot about past tense, and how you make it. And we've been practicing the irregular verbs. So hopefully you have them in mind. And here they help us out because the verbs are all in italics. That's this writing that's kind of fancy and slanted. So you see is, stammers, laughs. And what we have to do is look at each verb and then just write it in the past tense. Okay? So if you feel like you know them already, you can pause the video and do it yourself and then watch to check. Okay? But if you want to do it with me, then you are also welcome to do it with me. And in this one, I think we can write the full sentence. It's a good idea to practice. Okay? But I'm going to need to get more paper, so I will go get more paper. 1 second. So now I have some paper. Mr. Cleverbrain is so frightened he can't speak. That one is tricky. There are 2 verbs. Did you find the 2 verbs? That's right, is and can't. So then we write, put exercise 70. You can also just write EX with a dot. Mr. Cleverbrain was so frightened he, and the past of can is irregular also, and it is couldn't. Could not, right? Couldn't speak. Okay. And then number 2, let's look at it. Ghost, he stammers. And so stammer, that was also a vocabulary word. The past of stammer, it's a regular verb. So with regular verbs, we just put ed, right? So it would be a ghost. He stammered. Stammer, and then the ed. And if you aren't used to hearing English so much, you might think that says stammered, but no, this E you don't really hear. Stammered. Okay. Number 3. Mrs. Sourdough laughs grimly. So we have to change laugh. And it's a regular verb again. So what do you do with regular verbs? That's right, you just add ed. Mrs. Sourdough laughed grimly. Grimly was also a vocabulary word. Do you remember what it means? Then the next one. She shakes poor Mr. Cleverbrain till his glasses fall off. So that one has 2 verbs. Shakes and fall off. They are both irregular. So think. What is the past of shake, to shake? That's right, it's shook. She shook poor Mr. Cleverbrain. Oops, to make sure you can see what I'm doing. Poor Mr. Cleverbrain. Till his glasses fell. So fall, the past of fall, you just change A to E, fell off. Okay. Then number 5. Then she throws him into the hall of the castle and closes the door. Let's find the verbs. Throws and closes. Do you know them in the past? Then she threw. The past of throw is threw him into the hall of the castle and closed the door. Okay, now the next one, number 6. Mr. Cleverbrain is lying on the floor when Mr. Smarthead comes in. So we have is, you know that we had it up here too, right? And then comes, that's also irregular. Think about what could that be? I bet you know. So number 6. Mr. Cleverbrain was lying on the floor. Whoops. On the floor. I put points after Mr. In the book, they don't. I think that might be American versus British, but you can do it how you want. Mr. Cleverbrain was lying on the floor when Mr. Smarthead, and then the past of come is came. Okay, number 7. Mr. Smarthead knows there are ghosts in the castle. So here the verbs are knows and are. Okay, let's do it. 7. Mr. Smarthead knew, that's the past of know, there were ghosts in the castle. And the last one, number 8. The men open the door and Mr. Smarthead puts 10 pounds into each guard's hand. So open, right? And puts. So, number 8. The men opened the door Mr. Smarthead put, and here's the hard to write pound sign again. Let's see, put, I should look up how to do it right. 10 pounds into each guard's hand. Okay, and then we have completed exercise 70. And if you need to pause and look at some sentences to finish up, you can. The last thing I'd like you to do is underline all of the verbs. Okay, I'll do the first one. Was and couldn't. Okay, take a minute and go through. You could pause the video and do it. And then stammered, laughed, shook, fell, through, closed, was. You can also underline was lying, because that's what he was doing. He was lying. Came, knew, were, opened, and put. Okay, so now you have done a good grammar exercise. Okay, now you should work on exercise 72, which is a vocabulary exercise. So before you do it, it would be a good idea to review pages 49 to 51 in your book. On these pages, you have all of the vocabulary from chapter 8. So you remember from last week maybe, that you should have read through it and thought about them. So take a little time and read all of that one more time so that the words are fresh in your mind. And then take a look at the exercise, and I want you to try to do it yourself first. And in this case, you just have to write down the answers. So go ahead, do it, pause this video, and then when you turn it back on, I will go over the answers with you. So, number 1. I'll do it like this. I'll just read it. You can look in your own book to see the question. What do we call 12 o'clock at night, the middle of the night? That is midnight. When the clock bell rings 12 times, it is midnight. Number 2, school begins when the rings. Yes, it is. The bell rings. Number 3, what is the opposite of a son? That would be a daughter. The opposite of son is daughter. Take a look. It's difficult to spell daughter. Number 4, what is the opposite of first? Last. Number 5, what is the opposite of slowly? That is fast or quickly. Quickly is not the vocabulary word you have, but that comes to my mind. So fast or quickly. And 6, I asked her a question, but she didn't answer. She said nothing. And then 7, your glass is, can I fill it up? Your glass is empty. Can I fill it up? And then the next one, 8. What is the word for a room where you cook food? I think you know this one. You cook food in a kitchen. And then turn the page to 72. Number 8. What is the opposite of weak? Somebody who is not weak is strong. And the last one, most English shops are open 5 on Saturdays. That's right. Most English shops are open until 5 on Saturdays. So I hope that went well for you. We ended with some good vocabulary practice, and I will make a new video for you next week. Goodbye.